Hello, everyone. How is everyone doing? Hi, Blue. Hi, Lonjade. Let me know if you can hear me okay. I'm at my parents' house again, so the mic setup is a little different. Hi, Henry. I have a little cold today, which I didn't want to stop the stream for it. Like, I'm fine, but if I sound a little weird, that's why. But I am here and I am equipped with a lot of tea, so I should be good. Oh, Henry, excellent timing. I just finished catching up. That's awesome. You just made it. Perfect. You're the one with perfect timing. Um, and last stream was pretty eventful. We had Xiao Chia actually saying "I love you," and I don't know why I was not like surprised, but I guess I wasn't expecting like literally saying I love you at that point in the narrative, and it just happened and I was like, "Oh my God." And it's such a beautiful scene. And what else is happening right now? Um I think Xiaoqia had a plan about how to deal with Lei Jingzhe, and he didn't actually go and get him yet. Oh, and we ended on kind of a big deal, bit of information, um, about, yeah, the Emperor about to ascend the throne is a woman. So the question is, who is that going to be? Yeah, the Emperor is a woman. Henry, you say it's Hua Xiangyi, I bet, or the Empress Dowager. Goodness, if it's the Empress Dowager, that's gonna be a time. Um, Oh, I'm glad you didn't skip today. Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you were able to catch up too, because seriously, it was like we got an I love you and a new emperor. I'm so curious about who the new emperor is going to be. Um, yes, oh, hi Nina. And Blue, yes. Oh, how I love you. It feels so old school. It really took me by surprise too. Yeah, there's just something about the way it was phrased and everything. Um, I am very excited for today. I'm really excited to find out who the heck the Emperor is going to be. And like I said, I don't know if we're going to hear more about this yet, but I believe they took some of the bandits prisoner, I believe, and they have the kid Li Xiong, and this whole time I've been like, hey, so Li Xiong, surname Li, is that the same Li as like the late emperor? Question mark. And yeah, so I'm there's a lot of things going on right now that need to be clarified, and there's I'm sure there's a lot that we're not going to find out for a long time, but I'm very excited for this stream. Hi, vase of peonies. Henry, plot twist, it's Shenza Chuan in drag somehow. Somehow. I don't know, Tong Jo Ching. I think she'd find a way to make it work. So, alright, I'm gonna get started. Um, we are on chapter 120 on page 109, which is called Capital Affairs. Ooh, the first sentence. Okay. There was no place for women in the imperial court. The rule of heaven drove them into the inner chambers, where they became delicate objects kept within the small courtyard of their living quarters, cared for in every way by their monarch and their servants, their fathers and sons. While they waited to be married off, these noble daughters were porcelain vases appraised for their value. Vases had no lofty aspirations or opinions on where they might be placed. That is that is an opening paragraph for a chapter. The Empress Dowager, Hua He came from illustrious origins. She was a daughter of direct descent, born to the principal wife of the Hua clan. As a child, she had seen nothing of the world beyond the walls of her quarters, and even after her coming-of-age ceremony at 15, she was still bound within the confines of her courtyard. As empress, she had wrested away the highest power in the world from her husband's hands, yet still she never stepped beyond that line into the public world of men. Instead, she drew down the beaded curtain that kept women out of sight of the court and ruled cautiously from behind it. Marshal Qi Juyin came from a similarly distinguished line. She was a daughter of direct descent, born to the principal wife of the Qi clan, a family of celebrated generals. Before she went to war, she had been betrothed, but after she came back a soldier, no man dared marry her. She had never received the public conferment of rank she deserved, only a concession before the Jade Dragon Terrace. The Ministry of Rights claimed that as a woman, she was unworthy of enjoying the posthumous privilege of being enshrined and worshipped within the imperial ancestral temple after death, as other such distinguished individuals were. Even today, the great General Qi Juyin was spoken of in Chudu as the little girl from Qidong. If even one of Qi Shiyu's sons had lived up to expectations, the position of commander-in-chief of the Qidong garrisons would never have fallen upon her shoulders. Shui Xiuzhuo hadn't planned on helping a woman take the throne at the beginning. That acute disappointment of finding out the lost imperial heir was a girl had driven him to immediately change his strategy. But he changed his mind again when he met Ling Ting. The girl resembled the Guangcheng Emperor far too much. Any minister old enough to have known the Guangcheng Emperor would be able to guess Ling Ting's parentage at a glance. She was an aberration, the result of incest within the Li clan. After the Eastern Palace fell from power during the reign of Yongyi, the Guangcheng Emperor only ever left the palace to call upon the consumptive Prince Qin and his beautiful, defenseless wife. The emperor had no favored concubine in the latter years of his reign, and after he fell ill, his wife and empress, Hua He, seized control of the imperial court and harem to prevent him from begetting another heir. Confined within the layers of walls around him, the Guangcheng Emperor set his sights on his daughter-in-law. It was only a pity Princess Consort Qin gave birth to a girl. Like an old lion who had run himself into the ground, the ailing Guangcheng Emperor had hardly cracked open his eyes when he learned the news. After this, he let go of all the lofty aspirations he had harbored for another son. No one knew when Prince Qin caught wind of the affair, but not long after, the prince passed away from his own illness. Before his death, he had cast Ling Ting out of Chudu, but as if guided by the hand of fate, Xiang Yun had come across her and brought her back. Wait, Xiang Yun. Which one? Why am I totally blanking on who Xiang Yun is again? We know who this is. I'm a little taken aback by the information we just received. So I'm blanking right now. When Shui Xiuzhuo found Ling Ting, she was already in her teens and uncouth in her behavior. Preparing her to take up the role of imperial heir would have been an impossible task without the will to transform her from the inside out, a process as painful as shaving living bone. Oh, Xiangyun, like Xiangyun Villa, I guess. At first, It was difficult. She had wasted so much time in Xiangyun Villa. If the girl lacked the resolve to completely erase all those superfluous traces of her early life, then nothing could be done, even if Xue Xiuduo himself had the superhuman endurance to try. Henry, first Danmei writer with an all men are trash rhetoric, and I respect that she pulls it off. Yeah, I feel that. Is that so? I'm not sure. There's Xiangyun Villa, and I don't know if they're saying like Xiangyun Villa as like an entity had come to take her back. Or is that I don't think that's Shue Shoujuo's other name. I think it was something different. Oh, it's the oh right, it's the right Xiangyun Villa, of course. So the brothel just at large, yeah, had come to yeah, okay. All right. Yeah. Where was I? But Ling Ting had corrected herself, one step at a time. Little by little, she carved away those vulgar and frivolous traits. When she began, there were many words she could not read, so she studied through the night, practicing the strokes she couldn't write properly all day and well into the darkness. She seemed to possess the last remnant of strength heaven had left for the Li dynasty. Watching her, Xue Xiujuo saw a faint glimmer of light in that dark and crumbling empire. A few months ago, when the warm and misty rains of spring had enveloped the silk tree blossoms, when Qi Huilian, held prisoner, had rejected Xue Xiujuo, Ling Ting had been sitting upright at a table, practicing calligraphy. She put so much strength in her strokes, she almost tore the paper. When she was done, Ling Ting turned her head aside to look out at the drizzle. She watched the rain shimmer down for a long time, expressionless. Later, when Xue Xiujuo came to have his meal with her, she sat politely at her place at the table and ate with exacting table manners. Xue Xiujuo was particular about not speaking while eating, so they never talked during their meals. Afterward, it was his habit to quiz Ling Ting on her studies. This was the most important event of the girl's day. Ling Ting had to be precise and clear in her answers. Xue Xiujuo never scolded or hit her, but he was more stringent with her than anyone had ever been. Xiansheng. Ling Ting paused with her head lowered. Am I going to have a new teacher? Gathering the books on the table, Xue Xiujuo said without inflection, This isn't something you ought to concern yourself with. Ling Ting was silent. She sat with her hands on her knees, listening as Xue Xiujuo rose and walked toward the door. At last, she turned to look at him. Is it because I'm a woman? Xue Xiujuo stopped and turned back to look at Ling Ting, too. The girl never averted her eyes. Her steady composure resembled Xue Xiujuo's own. I'm a woman, Ling Ting repeated. If this is the reason the new teacher isn't willing to teach me, then I'd like to ask to meet him. Xue Xiujuo turned away and proceeded to change his shoes. The rain outside grew louder. No, you two are simply not fated to be teacher and pupil. I will continue to teach you. Fate will not give in to compromise. Wise instructors are hard to come by. I don't wish to miss out on such a teacher. Ling Ting had already risen to her feet. Xiansheng. But Xue Xiujuo did not look back or answer her. He lifted the curtain, and a servant boy waiting outside rushed to hold an umbrella for him. Carrying the books himself, Xue Xiujuo descended the steps and left. Ling Ting stood where she was and watched through the gap of the curtain as Xue Xiujuo disappeared into the downpour within a few strides. There's art, by the way. Hold up. Art. Beautiful as always. And I love I love that she's standing up for herself like this. She knew this was an unvoiced rejection from Xue Xiuzhuo. Whatever other people thought of Xue Xiuzhuo, in Ling Ting's eyes, beneath his pleasant and refined mask was a terrifyingly calm core, as well as a subtle arrogance. He would never let himself be manipulated by others, and could rarely be convinced to change his mind. Blue, somehow you always imagine Xue Xiuzhuo as older, like in his 40s, even though he's not. I guess he kind of has that energy. She had no choice but to let the matter drop. She sat back down, flipped open the essay on contemporary politics Xue Xiuzhuo had left behind, and began to copy Xue Xiuzhuo's handwriting. For all her practice, she could never write like him. She didn't know how to rein herself in, or sand down her edges. Her strokes were like steel blades. They could cut, but not bend. Every word she wrote took the most direct path. That is cool. That's a really cool uh metaphor. Um or whatever you call it, just like the image of her writing being so sharp and it kind of matching her personality. I like that. I don't know what that means about how she'll be as an emperor, but I like it. Several months later, the sun blazed down upon the heads of a dense mass of court officials kneeling on the Jade Dragon Terrace. These were officials from common households, led by Hai Liangyi. At the end of the 6th month, Han Chung had brought back a boy from his own clan, claiming the child was a lost descendant of the Li clan. Under Yao Wenyu's meticulous care, Hai Liangyi's health had improved enough for him to attend court. The first thing he did when he returned was reject Han Chung's memorial regarding the child in his capacity as Grand Secretary of the Grand Secretariat and demand an official verification of the child's identity. But the emperors of the Li clan were all dead. The Empress Dowager alone couldn't determine if this child was a legitimate descendant either. The two parties sank into a stalemate, neither willing to make any concession. Han Chung, head swollen with his new power, had dared to publicly refute Hai Liangyi. I was the vice commissioner of the 8 great battalions during the reign of Yongyi, and the top military officer under the Guangcheng Emperor's command. I have in my possession a private letter from the Guangcheng Emperor, entrusting me with the care of this child. Grand Secretary, does this not satisfy you? All the vigor Hai Liangyi had possessed before his illness had faded. If he stood a few moments too long, his heart would palpitate and his hands would tremor. He stepped out of the ranks of officials and said, "These are mere words, with no basis in evidence. If the commander is willing to make the private letter public and turn it over to the Grand Secretariat for examination, then you and I will have no further need to wage this war of words in the imperial court." Inwardly, Han Chung sneered. The vacant throne and lack of an imperial heir should have been Hai Liangyi's greatest sources of anxiety. If he was unwilling to make a concession here, the Secretariat elder must have already found his own candidate. The throne of the Emperor has sat empty for more than a month. What is your Excellency waiting for? The Grand Secretariat has deliberated again and again. Have you still not come up with a solution? Sweating profusely and feeling a tightness in his chest, Hai Liangyi took several shallow breaths before replying. We examined the imperial clan register and learned that the second son of the former Prince Yan's common-born grandson still resides in Huaizhou. He is a descendant of the Li clan with a traceable lineage. According to our laws, no one but him is a fit candidate for the throne. Prince Yan was the Prince of Huaizhou during the reign of Wan Xuan. His direct descendants died in battle at Luoxia Pass, and those born to concubines are all collateral branches of the clan. How can they be considered to possess the blood of the Li clan? Not to mention, the second son of Prince Yan's common grandson is approaching 70. Do you imagine he can manage state affairs at his age? Han Chung smiled without humor. It's a long and bumpy journey to Chudu. Can he weather this kind of physical and mental torment? Grand Secretary, the very idea is absurd. Both parties stood their ground. The students from the Imperial College were also kneeling outside. From behind the beaded curtain, the Empress Dowager, who had been listening in silence, spoke up. Although this matter is urgent, we must take time to discuss it fully. Secretariat Elder, I appreciate the Grand Secretariat's assistance in governmental affairs. There has never been a time when I've handled such important matters with anything less than the care they require. If you have objections, come to Mingli Hall to discuss them with me in person. Please ask the students to disperse. She spoke gently, but Hai Liangyi could hear her displeasure. Although Han Chung was forceful in his advocacy for this child, he had always submitted his memorials in his capacity as the former vice commissioner of the 8 Great Battalions, without asking other officials from the noble clans to support his proposal. This was deliberate. Firstly, it would allow the Han clan to become the sole support the new emperor relied upon. And secondly, it would allow him to distance himself from the other noble clans. This distance was exceptionally important. Both Hua Siqian and Pan Rugui had lost their lives because they failed to put on a proper show of distance. Forming cliques to further one's own ends was a major taboo in the imperial court. The Empress Dowager had been managing state affairs again for 2 months. At present, she was as good as the emperor. And one thing she couldn't abide was her ministers flocking together to coerce her into making policy decisions. She neither promoted officials from common households as a gesture of goodwill, nor promoted officials from the noble clans in order to consolidate her power. She seemed to understand that Great Zhou had reached a tipping point. Instead of pinning her hopes on a puppet emperor, as she had done a few years ago, she might as well count on herself. Hai Liangyi had been sick for weeks, during which time the officials from common households had been constantly on edge. In the absence of an emperor, Kong Qiu and Sen Yu had taken the lead, holding private discussions and repeatedly submitting memorials requesting that the Empress Dowager allow Hai Liangyi to return to the imperial court to administer state affairs. Now, even the students from the Imperial College had the guts to engage in open discourse regarding state affairs. It was only the 6th month, yet already there were rumors that the Empress Dowager had seized power and planned to establish herself as the ruler of the realm. The Empress Dowager had no overt discussions with Hai Liangyi while he was convalescing, but she sent the court eunuchs to his manor with increasing frequency, which was a kind of subtle pressure in itself. Hai Liangyi thus returned to court partway through the 6th month, just as his illness began to take a turn for the better. Although he had for decades asserted that he was beholden to no faction or clique, he had long become the beacon to which all the scholars of common households in the land looked for guidance. This was a fact he couldn't deny, even if he wished to. He had, without meaning to, become a powerful force all his own. When Hai Liangyi had fallen ill, everyone across the land had panicked. When Hai Liangyi rejected Han Chung's memorial, the officials and students spent a day kneeling before the Empress Dowager even gave her reply. Without realizing it, he had become a thorn in the Empress Dowager's side, one far more dangerous than the pompous and overbearing Han Chung. Well, that's probably what led to his demise, because I kind of almost forgot that last stream we also found out that Hai Liang Yi was dead, and I think we're leading up to that point. Hai Liang Yi remained standing with great effort. The students of the Imperial College have always had a duty to discuss state affairs. The eyes of the Empire are fixed on the Imperial Court. Only when there is open dialogue can there be good policies. Your Majesty heads the administration and attends to every matter with diligence, but officials are appointed to share the burdens of their superiors above, and to oversee the work of their subordinates below. It's great Zhou's blessing that these students are so concerned over state affairs. Moreover, the matter of the prospective monarch is not a private family affair. It is this subject's opinion that only by allowing them to remain can we have a frank discussion concerning the new emperor. Though it was warm outside, it wasn't stuffy in the hall, and there were bamboo blinds and crushed ice everywhere. To Hai Liang Yi, it even felt a little cool. He stood with his head bowed after saying his piece. Behind the beaded curtain, the Empress Dowager was silent for a long time. Just as Hai Liang Yi's legs were starting to ache, she finally answered in an unhurried tone. What the Secretariat Elder says makes sense. In that case, I shall listen to you. As for the matter of the second son of Prince Yan's common grandson, I have yet to see the clan registry, so it would be inappropriate for me to come to any conclusion. Regardless, Han Chung's candidate is already here. Shall we let the Court of Judicial Review assist in the investigation? Or would you prefer the Ministry of Justice do it? I shall do as you say. That is the end of the chapter. We are on page 119 for chapter 121, which is called Liang Yi. When court was dismissed, Hai Liang Yi refused the support of anyone as he walked out. Kong Qiu and the rest knew the Secretariat Elder was strong-willed and hated to appear weak. They only dared trail behind him and watch as he hobbled along alone, slowly making his way down the steps. Bathed in the last rays of the setting sun, his official robe was like a thin, dark scar melting into the evening splendor. This time last year, he had led hundreds of officials into court. He had been an imposing, spirited sight. Now, there was no trace of that will and spirit left in him. Hai Liang Yi reached the bottom of the steps and stopped. He slowly turned back to look at the officials on the stairs behind him, then at the last remaining glimmer of daylight above the upturned eaves of Mingli Hall. It's getting dark, Hai Liang Yi said gently. Be careful on your way back. For some reason, Kong Qiu was gripped by a sudden dread. He took a step forward and grasped Hai Liang Yi's arm to support him, his voice catching as he called out, Teacher. Hai Liang Yi waved a hand and turned back, walking toward the palace gates. That descendant of Prince Yan's grandson was Hai Liang Yi's last line of defense. As he watched the setting sun swallowed up by the shadows of the buildings, a sense of powerlessness washed over him. He knew what it signified for a child of the Han clan to ascend the throne. He had fought this battle for 30 years, yet his slow and steady pursuit of peace had never scored him the victories he sought. What could he do but use himself as tinder, throwing his old bones into the flames to feed the blazing fire, hoping to make enough sparks to ignite the long dormant night sky? An endless night had descended upon the Zhou Empire, and Hai Liangyi seemed to be the only remaining torch. Yet even now, he couldn't quite bring himself to admit that Shi Huilian and the rest, all those who once shared the same goal as him, despite their differing paths, had failed. He had watched those great minds fall like shooting stars, one after another. In the end, he, once so insignificant, was the last man standing. 30 years ago, Hai Liangyi had not been concerned with either success or failure. And now, after 30 years, Hai Liangyi was entirely burned out and spent. Slowly but surely, he had walked his own path. He had attempted to grab hold of the radical Qi Huilian, who had charged recklessly ahead, but he'd failed. No one knew that the night the Eastern Palace had perished was the most devastating in Hai Liangyi's life. By the time Hai Liangyi made his way to the palace gates, it was full dark, and he was out of breath. He lifted his sleeves to wipe sweat from his brow, and saw Yao Wenyu waiting for him beside the sedan. Hai Liangyi let Yao Wenyu help him get settled inside. Just as the student was about to lower the curtain, Hai Liangyi spoke. Yuan Zhuo, there is weight on my mind that has yet to be lifted. Why don't you make a trip to Jincheng tomorrow on my behalf? Pack your bags tonight. Yowie Man is back. I was waiting for him. But yes, I agree. Context, please, I beg. Henry, I'm also wondering what Hai Liangyi's specific connection to the Eastern Palace and Shi Huilian is. Very curious about that. During the court session a few days later, the Empress Dowager exempted Hai Liangyi from standing. But the more she treated him with courtesy and respect, the more clearly it signaled her increasing dissatisfaction with him. The Grand Masters of Remonstrance from the Chief Surveillance Bureau had come together over the past few days to launch a series of scathing rebukes of Han Chung. Demands for official verification of the lineage of the child from the Han clan were at an unprecedented high, and the tidal wave of support surging around Hai Liangyi forced the Empress Dowager to consider a concession. The Empress Dowager had stayed awake all night deliberating, and her hesitation put Han Chung in a desperate situation. Gradually, it dawned on him that the Empress Dowager was trying to rid herself of him by someone else's hand. As soon as he collapsed under the weight of his gambit, and perished beneath the chorus of castigation, the Empress Dowager could put the Han clan's son on the throne at once, without the inconvenient possibility of Han Chung making his own grab for power. With him out of the way, she could turn her focus to confronting the officials of common backgrounds. Whether she wished to push Hai Liangyi aside indefinitely, or simply replace the Grand Secretary of the Grand Secretariat, she could do it with significantly more ease than she could at present. Han Chung was unwilling to give up. How could he surrender the power that was at his fingertips? If he had to put up with the censor's abuse, he would endure it until Hai Liangyi was dead. These are turbulent times, Han Chung said. Li Bei in the north is eyeing us like a tiger watches prey, while in the east, Zhongbo is beginning to stir as well. Will the people still follow the lead of the Grand Secretary if the throne sits empty because the Grand Secretariat keeps delaying the question of the imperial heir? His mouth was blistered from the verbal battle that had gone on for days. He flung his sleeves and snapped. If you ask me, the Grand Secretary is inciting his own clique to obstruct the imperial court from designating a new crown prince. His actions ought to be condemned. That's a slanderous accusation. Tenyu rebuked him in his capacity as the head of the Imperial Censors. We've been discussing the appointment of the Imperial heir for days on end, yet the commander remains unwilling to verify the identity of the Imperial heir. Who is the one trying to obstruct our efforts? The Imperial Court previously enjoyed the support of the whole realm. If not for the commander's insistence on arresting the Marquis of Dingdu, Xiao Chuye, would Shudu be caught in such a predicament? If we are to hold someone accountable, you would be the first to bear the blame. I see how it is. Han Chung sneered and pointed at Sen Yu. Xiao Chuye assassinated the late emperor. As chief commander of the Embroidered Uniform Guard and military commissioner of the 8 great battalions, it was my duty to apprehend him. If what I did was wrong, perhaps you think he was right to assassinate the late emperor. Everyone knows you're on good terms with Xiao Chuye and Shen Zichun. Yet Chen Xunyi, the Ministry of Justice, hasn't implicated you in their investigation, have they? What a good friend you have in Kong Boran. I'm truly envious. Fury colored Kong Chou's face. What nonsense is this? We're still investigating whether Xiao Chuye was involved in the late emperor's death. If we merely take your word for it without any witnesses, we might as well do away with the Ministry of Justice. Besides, were you not also present during our private feast? You had plenty to drink. I'm a member of the Embroidered Uniform Guard, Han Chung said. It is my duty to keep my ear to the ground at all times, making note of what I see and hear. If I don't show up when you senior officials have your private gatherings, how can I know what has been said? I already had someone transcribe everything that was discussed that night in detail for Her Majesty. I'm innocent. Do you dare say the same? Having received a helping hand from Xiao Chuye in the past, the Minister of Works, Pan Xiangjie, was also fearful of being implicated and had been keeping a low profile in court. Han Chung was at the height of his power, and Pan Xiangjie went along with whatever he said. Seeing them argue like this, his lips opened and closed, and he shuffled several steps back like a turtle retreating into its shell, too cowardly to cut in. Henry, is it an Embroidered Uniform Guard thing to be an alcoholic? Are we all following Jigong's lead? Apparently. Gradually, their verbal assaults became more and more outrageous. Tenyu was the most eloquent of them all, berating Han Chung with such scathing force that Han Chung could endure it no longer. He pointed at Tenyu, his hand trembling with a rage that threatened to burst out of him. Still, he kept his wits. Closing his eyes, he slid to his knees and, surrendering his dignity, burst out into wailing. Your Majesty! Han Chung prostrated himself before the Empress Dowager and wept bitterly. Your Majesty! This subject's heart is no less pure and bright than the moon overhead. It's my fault for trying to arrest Xiao Chuye. It was also my fault that the late emperor was assassinated. And now, somehow, it's my fault that we have no candidate for the throne. As a subject, I'm willing to be punished by my sovereign, and I'm willing to die for my sovereign. If I've erred, let the blame fall upon me. Kill me alone, or execute my family along with me. I will accept any sentence my master metes out. Kong Cho found this man truly shameless. He promptly removed his official's hat. I am ashamed to stand beside such a vile character as the chief commander. If we cannot verify the legitimacy of the imperial heir, then I, Kong Boran, may as well forfeit my official post. The Empress Dowager shot to her feet. She lifted the beaded curtain, sweeping a cold glance over each of them in turn, before stopping at Han Chung. We're discussing matters of state in the imperial court. What are you crying for? Get up. She next turned to Kong Chiu. You are a member of the Grand Secretariat, effectively second to the Grand Secretary. You preside over affairs of state, yet you constantly use your resignation as a threat. Are you trying to force my hand? Or are you thinking only of your own reputation? Only you would know. Since the first moment I stepped in on behalf of the throne, I have consulted with the Grand Secretariat in all matters, great and small. What is there that can't be worked out through civil discourse? Must you push every step of the way? All the ministers fell to their knees. Our forefathers laid down the rule that the harem is not to interfere in politics. I have overstepped my station so many times it shames me to face my ancestors. Jianheng passed away so suddenly from illness. Had it not been for your repeated pleas, would I have dared to appear before this court once again to oversee state affairs? We are in need of an emperor, and I'm merely a widow without a child. Hot tears brimmed in her eyes as she spoke. When did I ever suffer such treatment while the Guangcheng Emperor lived? I love that the Empress Dowager is like, you keep forcing me to get involved. I don't want to get involved. I don't want the political power. I want to just stay in my station. I'm not here for this. Han Chung appeared so moved by the Empress's abiding love for her husband that he covered his face as he lay down on the ground, wailing. This subject never encountered such disrespect when the Guangcheng Emperor was around either. I know well that I'm an ignorant and shallow person. I'm merely an oaf. Of course, I'm not so bold as to compare myself to any of the officials from the Grand Secretariat, much less vie with the Grand Secretary himself or prestige. It's only because of my staunch loyalty and love for the Li dynasty that I returned the imperial heir to the court. Grand Secretary, why go so far to defame me? Han Chung had been fanning the flames toward Hai Liangyi all this time. Deep down, Kong Cho was smoldering with anger. Your Majesty, heaven can attest to the purity of the Grand Secretary's intentions. Designating an heir is no small thing. We are beset with difficulties on all sides. The survival of Great Zhou is at stake. If we do not proceed with prudence and caution now, I fear we will face disaster in the future. I understand that as well, the Empress Dowager replied. And that is why I have called everyone here for days on end to discuss it. At last, she seemed to regain a little of her composure. The imperial heirs dwindled after the Guangcheng Emperor's time, and now we can't even find ourselves a prospective emperor. The tougher the crisis, the more important it is for us to work together as one. Han Chung, why not hand over the Guangcheng Emperor's private letter so all the officials present can verify its authenticity? Obviously, Han Chung had no such letter. He had merely been trying to wait out Hai Liangyi and the Empress Dowager. As soon as Hai Liangyi yielded, the wall of officials from common households would collapse with him. Any further protestations from the Empress Dowager would merely reveal her own ambitions to lead. At that point, she would have no choice but to let the Han clan child ascend the throne, and Han Chung would truly become the minister guardian of the young emperor. The golden age of the Han clan was right before his eyes. Well, he thought he was doing something. He thought he could get away with it. Realizing that the Empress Dowager wanted to take him off the board before that could happen, he beat his chest and wailed louder. The drama. Those of you who doubt my loyalty, you may as well kill me. My younger brother. My dear younger brother. After his hunt for Xiao Chiye, he remains hostage in Suzhou even now. For the Guangcheng Emperor, I took 3 slashes of a blade, and for the late Emperor, I suffered injury to one eye. Tell me, Am I a shallow, short-sighted person who deceives the world for my own selfish desire? Selfish desire was all that fueled the passionate discourse at court. Cries and curses flooded the hall, but no one mentioned Prince Yan's descendant again. Kong Cho remained kneeling, resigned, but his heart had already gone cold. Hai Liang Yi, who had not spoken a word that day, suddenly braced himself against the armrests of his chair and stood. Countless eyes converged on him. Officials from common backgrounds looked on expectantly, waiting for the Grand Secretary to turn the tide and regain control of the situation, while officials from the noble clans kept their silence as they watched for their next opportunity. All focused their attention on Hai Liang Yi, just as they had in the past. He coughed, his wizened hand trembling as he spat bloody spittle into a handkerchief. He swallowed to moisten his throat before slowly looking around the great hall at all those faces watching, and finally, at the Empress Dowager. Back when the Li clan were merely feudal lords, he said, it took years upon years of war before the empire was united. Over the past 100 years, generation upon generation of our great Zhou's officials have, without exception, devoted themselves to the land and spared no effort in performing their duties. During the years of Yongyi, although the city walls of Chudu were old, the empire's integrity remained, and its spirit persevered. At the beginning of the reign of Yongyi, Qi Huilian of Yuzhou came in first in all 3 levels of the imperial examinations. From then on, the imperial college flourished. Although the 3 imperial preceptors from the Yao clan were noble in birth, they had welcomed ideas and opinions from all sides and recruited outstanding men of talent without prejudice. Most of the scholars of humble origins still serving in this imperial court today joined the court during that period. Kong Cho lowered his head. As he recalled the past, he couldn't help but tremble with quiet sobs. However, this period of brilliance during the reign of Yongyi was but a flash in the pan. The Guangcheng Emperor fell ill after a scant 10 years on the throne. The noble clans thrived once again, and class prejudices divided the imperial college. For the remainder of Yongyi, and the whole of Xiande, no scholars of common backgrounds entered the imperial court. Today, this is the imperial court of the noble clans. Han Qiangjie looked embarrassed and kept his head low in a kowtow without saying a word. Han Cheng drew breath to speak, but Hai Liangyi raised his voice over him. During the reign of Xiande, when the state treasury was empty, this subject asked Hua Siqian to hand over the account books. He colluded with others from the noble clans who served in the various ministries to dodge the issue, and dismissed me time and time again. That same year, Jueshi was hit by a plague of locusts that ruined their crops, and the land was gripped by desolation and despair. Once again, this subject demanded that Hua Siqian hand over the accounts, only to have him brush me off. Not long after, Zhongbo's troops were defeated and its people massacred. Yet following this battle, the granaries of the 6 prefectures were emptied overnight. All the way until his death, Hua Siqian never gave a clear explanation for this. Was this his fault? Or was it the fault of everyone here for enabling him? Alarmed, Pan Qiangjie rushed to say, "About this, the Court of Judicial Review has already..." Since returning to court, this subject, Hai Renshi, has repeatedly remonstrated and requested to officially verify the lineage of the imperial heir from the Han clan. Han Cheng has made excuse after excuse. As of this moment, he is still unwilling to hand over the letter supposedly entrusting the child to him. We have reached a dead end. I therefore took charge and directed the Grand Secretariat to conduct a search through the imperial registry before moving forward with a memorial asking Her Majesty to designate the descendant of Prince Yan of Huaizhou as the heir apparent. Here, we have reached another dead end. Stunned by his impassioned tone, the Empress Dowager took half a step back. The beaded curtain clattered behind her as she regarded Hai Liangyi with shock and uncertainty. Hai Liangyi was aflame. The fury in his heart had been suppressed for 30 years, and it burned so intensely, his youthful spirit seemed to blaze up once more, leaving the entire hall in shock. As the Grand Secretary, I am to blame for the decline of the state. I have been remonstrating with the ruler all my life. Whether I am successful or not, I have no more to fear. Since my protests are futile while alive, then I shall remonstrate with our great Zhou today with my death. A prospective sovereign may be appointed, but it must not be the child from the Han clan. A prospective sovereign may be appointed. Oh no. We're doing a Danmei thing. Before anyone from the assembly could blink, Hai Liangyi's sleeves rose with the wind, billowing like falling leaves set alight before their eyes. He charged headfirst at one of the great hall's columns, and an earth-shaking thud followed, along with the splatter of blood. I said a Danmei thing, it's really just probably Chinese literature C-drama thing. It just seems like people are always running into columns. A deathly stillness descended over the hall. The Empress Dowager's limbs went cold, and she nearly slid to the ground. She followed the trail of that splattered blood with dread, until her eyes landed upon the crumpled form of Hai Liangyi. In a belated moment of realization, the entire court of officials rose to their feet with exclamations of shock. Kong Cho scrambled over on his knees and propped Hai Liangyi up. Rinshi, the Empress Dowager's voice trembled. Why? Why do this? This one collision permanently severed Han Cheng's route of retreat. With his death, Hai Liangyi would feed the flames of wrath of all the scholars in the land. That child of the Han clan would never become emperor. Whoever dared risk universal condemnation to push him onto the throne would be reviled by every scholar across the empire. Even Han Cheng was stunned. Never in his wildest dreams had he imagined Hai Liangyi would go so far. Face awash of blood, Hai Liangyi looked up at the high, unreachable ceiling of the great hall. He had been chasing stability all his life. The first-rank crane on the Mandarin square of his robe was a testament to his cautious, steady leadership. Yet, in his final moments, he for once did something extreme. He became the blazing sun that exploded, sending countless rays of light, shooting through that pitch-black night of Great Zhou. The crane on his chest, now stained blood-red, rose and fell with his last feeble breaths. Boran, Hai Liangyi whispered, gripping Kong Cho's hand. I have done all I can. Well, that's the end of the chapter. And for some reason, they gave us art of this. So, can you see? We have to look at this for some reason. So there's that. Henry, throughout all of this, we have to remember Shen Sichuan looks really pretty on the cover. Agreed. We'll just remember that. Just let that calm our souls. Oh, Blue, sorry, but all I heard was Moran. Are you talking about Kong Borong? Boran? Uh, we're always hearing Moran. Always thinking about him. Um, Henry, you said, since when are people always doing that? I've really only seen it in one or two things other than this, but I remember somebody talking about how it was a trope. Um, Blue, you said it's something that they did to protect their honor in the face of injustice and to voice their protest and despair. Yep, it seems to be a thing. So, oh yeah, vase of peonies. Oh yeah, that happens all the time in C-dramas. Henry, I remember when Brittany started Capri and we all heard Moran every time she said Laurent. Yes, it's like you wouldn't think it sounds that similar, but it totally does. Uh, so I am gonna take about a 10-minute break, and when I come back, we will be on page 133 for chapter 122, The Emperor's Daughter. You know, it would be wild if today all we had was like backstory of like what led up to this moment, and we didn't even return to the present with Xiaoqie and Shen Zichuan. I'm almost wondering if that's going to happen, because we do have to kind of, there's a lot to be updated on as far as like palace happenings, but I guess we'll find out. So I will see y'all in just a little bit. Hello. I have returned. We are so back. So we are unfortunately coming back to the reality that Hai Liang-yi is dead. And we are on page 133 for chapter 122, The Emperor's Daughter. Yu Xiaozai bent over and sobbed, unable to continue. All the common-born scholars of their generation who went on to take up official posts yearned to be either the patriotic and loyal Qi Huilian, who would lay down his life for his cause, or the wise and dedicated Hai Liang-yi, the stabilizing force that could hold the country together in times of crisis. But this empire, teetering in a tempest, now echoed with the thunderous sound of collapse. In one night, the lofty aspirations of several tens of thousands of people shattered, turning Great Zhou into a shaken nation that echoed with the wails of the desperate. Shen Zichuan turned his head aside in silence and listened to the sound of the night watchman making his rounds beyond the courtyard wall. So my theory about are we even going to return to them today? I guess we just did. I got a little ahead of myself. Yu Xiaozai finally ceased his sobbing and covered his face with a warm handkerchief. When he had composed himself, he continued. The Grand Secretary's final remonstration ended Han Cheng's ambitions, but he refused to concede defeat. The students from the Imperial College were so agitated that they blocked Han Cheng's sedan on Shenwu Street as he returned from court and smashed it to pieces. The 8 great battalions locked down the Imperial College, arrested a few of the student agitators, and hauled them to the Imperial prison. They even cut off food supplies to the college, so the students went on a hunger strike. Tears again rolled down Yu Xiaozai's face. I thought it would be the end of all the scholars in Chudu. But but that night, as I looked at the Imperial College on top of Mount Jingyi, I saw the flickers of revolution and realized the profound foresight of the Grand Secretary. The blaze that would spread across the plains from the single spark of his death had already become a force to be reckoned with. To quell the fury of the students, the Empress Dowager once again demanded Han Chung hand over the private letter, entrusting the child to his care. In the meantime, she drove that false heir from the Han clan out of the palace. Han Chung had no choice but to agree. He promised to produce the letter for official verification within 3 days. Oh, sorry if y'all just heard a weird noise. Could you still hear me talking over it? It was just the garage door opening downstairs. I'm just like right above it. And now it's closing. I'm gonna give that a second. Okay, good. You could hear me. No, Blue, you thought it was your PC. Nope, your PC is not making a weird noise. The letter was forged, of course, and did not bear the Guangcheng Emperor's personal seal. The Grand Secretariat immediately rejected Han Chung's candidate. After that, the Empress Dowager promised to meet with Prince Yan of Huaizhou's descendant to establish a true candidate for imperial heir. But Huaizhou is far from Chudu. Just as Han Chung had said, this descendant from Prince Yan's branch was advanced in age. Between the long and tedious journey and the shock of being called to Chudu for such a purpose, he gave up the ghost before even arriving in the capital. The task of designating a prospective sovereign came to a complete impasse. Han Chung, conniving as he was, leveraged the 8 Great Battalion's power against the Grand Secretariat. He submitted a memorial requesting the 8 cities step in to assist with governmental affairs. He urged the Empress Dowager to establish a chamber for the deliberation of state affairs, populated entirely by officials from the noble clans. The Empress Dowager shelved the memorial without giving him an answer. Following in the footsteps of the Grand Secretary, Lord Boran submitted a memorial expressing conditional agreement with this plan, but requested that before Han Chung could lead such a chamber, his military power must be revoked, as civil officials must not involve themselves with military affairs. Minister Kong hoped to use the opportunity to pry the 8 Great Battalions out of Han Chung's hands. Han Chung flatly refused, and thus the Grand Secretariat didn't give their approval for the chamber. Negotiations fell through once again. The lack of an imperial heir was the crux of the stalemate. With Kong Chiu at the helm, and in the face of the proposal for the 8 cities to take up the reins of government, the officials of the Grand Secretariat had suggested a compromise. This, too, was in line with Hai Liangyi's policy of keeping the peace. After all, the Grand Secretariat had no troops. Qidong was under control of the Empress Dowager, and Li Bei no longer obeyed Chudu's deployment orders after Han Chung's attempt to arrest Xiao Qiye. Kong Chiu could only choose the lesser of 2 evils. Their most pressing goal was stripping Han Chung of his military power. Whether or not they had control of the military themselves, they could not afford to hand over all the patrols in Chudu to the noble clans as they had before. It was at precisely this moment that Xue Xiuzhuo spoke up. Yu Xiaozai's lips quirked in a vague, bitter smile in the dimness. With one stone, he stirred up 1,000 waves. The move he made was ingenious. At the mention of Xue Xiuzhuo's name, Xiao Qiye looked pointedly at Shen Zichuan. After a moment of silence, Shen Zichuan turned to gaze out the window, his brow tightly furrowed. Yes, you were right. This man is really something else. Rumors of an imperial heir made their way to us too easily, stirring us to action. When we arrived in Zhongbo, I suspected Han Chung was the one who killed those boys. But it seems that Han Chung is no different from Shi Hongshuan, another disposable pawn manipulated by Xue Xiujuo. It was careless of me to underestimate our enemy. One wrong move, and the whole game is lost. The impasse in the imperial court had gone on less than half a month when the imperial college shifted the target of their verbal attacks from Han Chung to the prospect of the 8 cities' oversight of governmental affairs. The passionate students grew increasingly dissatisfied with Kong Chou's moderate strategy, even as they penned articles and elegies mourning Hai Liang-yi. They mourned the more radical Qi Huilian as well. Kong Chou, at present, was not the grand secretary they wished for. The Empress Dowager's concession on verifying the Han clan's candidate had shown these students the power of collective action. They were like water droplets converging from all corners of the realm to form the boundless sea, believing their combined force could crash through the high wall before them. They saw a chance to rid the nation of the malady that was the noble clans right before their eyes. After Kong Chou conditionally agreed to Han Chung's proposal for the new governmental chamber, the rhetoric coming out of the Imperial College abruptly changed in focus. First, a strongly worded article was nailed to the door of the Kong residence. Following that, all the criticisms formerly leveled at Han Chung were redirected toward Kong Chou. The students became increasingly convinced that the scholar officials of common backgrounds led by Kong Chou were too weak. This, they thought, was why Hai Liang-yi had been left high and dry in the Grand Secretariat, leading to his desperate action in his final remonstration. They made a list of all the court officials from the reign of Yongyi and checked, one by one, any connections those officials might have with officials from the noble clans. News that Chen Yu had invited Han Chung to a private feast earlier in the year spread like wildfire, sending the students into a frenzy. They labeled Chen Yu, Kong Chou, and even the Minister of War, Chen Zhen, as rank hypocrites. Ooh, Henry, you said nailed to the door. Wasn't there something else nailed to the door around this part of the Ming Dynasty? I actually... Oh, you're talking about the Reformation. I was like, wait, because... a short time later, a group smashed Sen Yu's sedan on his way to morning court. He stood before the palace gates with his face covered in blood and raised a hand to heaven, swearing he had never had any inappropriate friendships with the noble clans. A bucket of shit was poured on him for his trouble. Tenyu couldn't believe these were the same students as before. He had served in the Chief Surveillance Bureau for 20 years and indicated countless major and minor officials of the court. Indicted countless major and minor officials of the court. He hadn't shied away from challenging even the Guangzhou emperor. He'd never expected his name would one day be dragged through the mud as a villain who shamelessly sought personal gain at the expense of the nation. Even the Yao clan, held up as the exemplar of scholars who were concerned with politics yet kept their distance from power, was not spared. This clan that produced 3 imperial preceptors had enjoyed exceptional honor over the years. Though they had no representative in the imperial court after the reign of Xiande, their influence far surpassed that of the other clans. They were widely respected among both the noble clans and those of common backgrounds. Hai Liang-yi, Qi Huilian, Kong Chou, and many other old and new officials of the imperial court had all received the Yao clan's advice and guidance at one time or another. The thriving heyday the Imperial College had enjoyed during the reign of Yongyi had been owed entirely to Old Master Yao's extensive recruitment of talented men. Yet now, the doors and windows of the clan's ancestral hall on the east side of the capital had been smashed. Had Kongqiu not sent guards as soon as he heard, the hall would have burned down that night. Yao Wenyu himself did not escape the fury. He was Hai Liangyi's only student, yet he refused to take up an official position in the imperial court. His absence last time the Imperial College knelt in protest and clashed with Panru Gui had not been forgotten. Now, with new grievances piling up on top of old scores, they tore up the essays they had once praised and likened Yao Wenyu to a thief, a swindler from the noble clans who had stolen Hai Liangyi's rare wealth of knowledge on the administration of the nation, yet refused to put it to use. Chudu was plunged into chaos. The moment the 8th grade battalions tried to suppress the students with force, the students would go on a hunger strike in protest. After a handful of students starved themselves to death, Han Chung no longer dared act rashly. Not even Shi Juyan, all the way in the Bianjun commandery, managed to make it out unscathed. The marriage between Hua and Qi was due to take place the next month, and those impassioned student diatribes spread like a brush fire all the way to Qidong. The Grand Marshal had always been plagued by insomnia. Now, whenever she wished to rest her eyes at her desk, she asked Qi Wei to read those essays aloud to her. The harsher the scoldings, the more soundly she slept. I love that. That's so funny. A fire had indeed begun to rage across the Zhou Empire, but not in the way Hai Liangyi had anticipated. Words like flaming arrows whizzed through the night, drawing a clear boundary between opposing sides. The student protesters demanded strict allegiance and a clear differentiation of black from white. There was no middle ground, only a bitter fight to the death. Kongqiu insisted he would take no sick leave, but attending court gradually became a dangerous affair. One day, just as he was preparing to head out despite his exhaustion, he encountered a stranger in the innermost courtyard of his estate. The man brandished a sword and berated him, demanding Kongqiu atone for his crimes with his life. In his capacity as an esteemed official of the Grand Secretariat, Kongqiu often received students from out of the city, and had never bothered to set up any true defenses around his residence. To think a day would come when a stranger would hold a sword to his throat in his own home. It was simply the greatest and most ludicrous joke in the world. It was around this time that Xue Shouzhuo presented 3 memorials. Their contents were like a towering wave that crashed down and extinguished the crackling fire, its rolling billows winning the scholars over in one great sweep. In his first memorial, he spoke of the innumerable hardships he underwent before finally finding the Guangcheng Emperor's long-lost daughter. He not only presented Prince Qin's personal seal as evidence, but also relevant witness testimonies proving the parentage of the girl beyond doubt. He requested an official verification of this evidence right there on the spot. However, having a woman as emperor was a disruption of the balance of yin and yang, a reversal of the sun and the moon. Such a violation of the natural order had no precedent in hundreds of years. Xue Xiaozhua's memorial sent the entire imperial court into an uproar. Even Kongqiu vehemently refuted the notion and refused to consider it. Thereupon, Xue Xiaozhua presented his second memorial. Blue, you wish you could scoff via text. For real. He revealed that this girl had been raised in a farming household in Chudu. An exceptionally bright child, she was well loved by the family. Although they were a poor household, they had been willing to let her older brother teach her to read and write. As a true-born descendant of the Guangcheng Emperor, she naturally differed from the common person. Her family often saw auspicious signs such as rainbows and purple clouds over the house, and thus dared not slight or neglect her, but treated her with utmost attentiveness. The girl was not only intelligent, but also kind. When her neighbors were in distress or elderly villagers were starving, she gave away her own food and personally attended to them. The voices from villages near and far were unanimous in their praise of her. This, too, could be corroborated with witness testimony. As for her demeanor and bearing, Xue Xiuzhuo would let the various gentlemen see for themselves when he brought the girl to court. The contents of this memorial quickly spread beyond the palace walls. Someone posted a copy in the Imperial College, and from there the news made its way to the streets of Chudu. There were fewer things in the world more precious than an emperor's daughter. The only other young lady who could presently claim such a status in Great Zhou was Third Lady Hua, who had grown up at the Empress Dowager's side. The contrast between the upbringing of the two, one raised in humble poverty, the other in the luxurious halls of the palace, made the hearts of the common folks ache with sympathy for the girl. Tea houses and wine taverns hosted storytellers who told the legendary tale of this imperial scion living among the people, likening her extraordinary gifts to those of an immortal descended to earth. She came from the masses, brought up by a family descended from generations of farmers, not unlike the current students in the Imperial College. She was righteous and benevolent, kind to her neighbors, and keenly able to relate to the hardships of the people. Even the students were carried away by this idealized vision. It was then that Xue Xiuzhuo submitted his third and most crucial memorial. In it, he said the girl's elder brother had also been an aspiring scholar. He had previously entered Chudu during the reign of Xiande, but due to prejudice over his humble origins, his name had never made it onto the list of those who passed. After returning home, he wasted away from disappointment. So deep was the affection between the emperor's daughter and her elder brother that this became the source of unbearable distress in her heart. On the way to Chudu, she had asked Xue Xiuzhuo many times about Secretariat Elder Hai's illness. When he spoke of how tirelessly Secretariat Elder Hai had worked tending to state affairs, the girl had shed bitter tears and lamented, "Were I a man, I would never have let the Secretariat Elder suffer such hardships." Xue Xiuzhuo admitted that even he, a son of common birth from a noble clan, who had been subjected to his own share of harsh treatment on account of his birth, did not possess the same magnanimity of heart as this emperor's daughter. For this failing, he wrote, he felt deeply ashamed. In closing, Xue Xiuzhuo said that there was no law in the world that decreed priority should be accorded to those of direct descent, nor those of noble blood in the selection of court officials, and that, similarly, no ancestors had ever said only male children must be considered when it came to the selection of a prospective sovereign. Regardless, at this stage, the Zhou Empire was left with no other choice. The students were rapturous. They had finally found a suitable candidate. Prejudices over parentage and class were their greatest hurdles to fulfilling their own ambitions. They saw themselves as fellow sufferers, commiserating with the emperor's daughter over her hard lot in life. Li Jianheng had grown up in the lap of luxury. He had no understanding of the hardships of the people, and had been repeatedly indicted by the Chief Surveillance Bureau for his pursuit of petty pleasures at the expense of worthwhile aspirations. How different he was from this emperor's daughter, bestowed upon their nation by the heavens. She seemed, in their imaginations, to be the most wonderful woman in the world. She had a heart that bled for the scholars of common origins. She was the goddess of mercy, who had descended to the mortal realm to deliver the masses from suffering. And thus, amid a buzz of discussion that lasted an entire night and into the next morning, Xue Xiujuo, who had been lying low for so very long, emerged at last as the victor. That's the end of the chapter. Blue. I'm so uncomfortable with how they're painting her into this perfect being, not gonna lie. Yeah, I feel that. Oh, right. Henry, she's never called an heir, only the Emperor's daughter. Okay, if I could just... I keep forgetting names. I know that we know this one. Chapter 123 is called Yan Qing. Why am I... Who is Yan Qing again? Or what is Yan Qing? Is it... Why... Why can't I remember? Oh well. By the time Yu Xiaozai finished this tale, the tea on the table had gone cold. I can't understand it, he said. The students had been so harsh on the officials from common backgrounds. Why would they flock to Xue Xiujuo overnight? Don't tell me Xue Xiujuo, a son of the noble Xue clan, can do more for those from humble families than the commoner Minister Kong of the Cangjun Commandery, who has always been diligent in administering state affairs. The Grand Secretary went to such great trouble to pave the way for us, yet it's still the noble clans who gained the upper hand in the end. Xiao Jie poured the cooled tea. Xue Xiujuo may not necessarily give the nobles the upper hand, he commented. This time, he struck when his opponents were unprepared and caught both sides off guard. The Empress Dowager went around in circles with Han Chung for so long because she had no candidate of her own. Clearly, Xue Xiujuo didn't leak any word of this girl to the old noble families aligned with the Empress Dowager. He also allowed his pawn Han Chung to put himself in a vulnerable position when the late emperor passed away. Xue Xiujuo has already offended the noble clans. He understands this better than anyone. Yu Xiaozai looked back at him with a worried frown. I thought about it all the way here, but I still can't figure out what he means to do. The new emperor will ascend the throne on a shaky foundation, and she's a woman to boot. Perhaps he did it merely for a moment of glory, but even if the Xue clan becomes more powerful, how long can Xue Xiujuo hold out under pressure from the Empress Dowager and the rest? Shen Zichuan was thinking quickly. We can't overlook a single clue if we want to understand this man's motives. At the Nanlin hunting grounds, when Hua Siqian was pressured to revolt against the Xianda Emperor, it was Secretariat Elder Hai and Xue Xiujuo who orchestrated the whole affair. At the time, Xue Xiujuo had audited the Ministry of Revenue's accounts in his role as Chief Supervising Secretary of the Office of Scrutiny for Revenue. You say Secretariat Elder Hai mentioned Hua Siqian's malfeasance again just before he died. My guess is that Xue Xiujuo was aware of the inside story of the fall of Zhongbo, and this was what allowed him to later join forces with Jiang Qingshan, the provincial administration commissioner of Jueshi, to investigate and take down Hua Siqian. This man is not cut from the same cloth as the likes of Wei Huaigu. He has been striking at the noble clans from the very beginning. When Shi Hongxuan talked about him, He said Shui Shoujuo was always busy with matters of state, Chen Zichuan continued. After I took office as the northern judge in the embroidered uniform guard, I looked through all the records of cases where the embroidered uniform guard and the Court of Judicial Review investigated in concert. Shui Shoujuo did in fact handle many cases after his transfer from the Office of Scrutiny for Revenue to the Court of Judicial Review. Secretariat Elder Hai was an upright person who would never play favorites. His repeated promotion of Shui Shoujuo was on Shui Shoujuo's own merits. Even Lord Chen mentioned Shui Shoujuo's abilities to me on numerous occasions. Everyone seems to agree that his political achievements are outstanding, even among other up-and-coming talents. Now enlightened, Yu Shaozai said, "To tell you the truth, Vice Commander, this is just what I can't figure out. All along, Shui Shoujuo has had a good reputation. Even the Imperial censors from the Chief Surveillance Bureau have hardly any objections to him. The Chief Surveillance Bureau's reviews of him are excellent, or he couldn't have been promoted. But that's why I don't understand the rationale behind his current actions. He's not like Pan Rugui and his ilk, who seized power merely to put money in their own pockets." Xiao Qie leaned back and draped his arms over the armrests of his chair. He said to Shen Zichuan, "That's right. We also discussed Shui Shoujuo when we were in Chudu. Yao Wenyu said that although Secretariat Elder Hai never accepted him as his pupil, he still held Shui Shoujuo in high regard. The Secretariat Elder even asked him to hold the crown during Yao Wenyu's coming-of-age ceremony. In the first few years after he took office, the policy essays he wrote focused on doing away with the prejudiced views of the noble clans in the hope that the Imperial College, led by Hua Siqian, might be restored to the glory it enjoyed in Grand Preceptor Yao's day. With the exception of Hai Liangyi, the Grand Secretariat at the time, as well as the 6 ministries beneath it, with the exception of Hai Liangyi, the Grand Secretariat at the time, as well as the 6 ministries beneath it, were almost entirely composed of officials from noble clans. For a long time, officials in Chudu were appointed solely based on their family name. Even the illiterate 13th son of the Hua clan could take up a post in the Ministry of War and interfere with the Imperial Army's affairs. Meanwhile, Kong Qiu was toiling away in the lower ranks of the Ministry of Justice, while Liang Cuishan, whom you yourself recommended for advancement, was repeatedly demoted within the Ministry of Revenue, with no hope of promotion. Shen Zichuan nodded slowly. The fact that Shui Shoujuo held the post of Chief Supervising Secretary of the Office of Scrutiny for Revenue at the time was an indication of Hua Siqian's desire to get him out of the way. The Chief Supervising Secretary was theoretically an important post that gave Shui Shoujuo direct access to the Emperor. But at the time, the Xianda Emperor was not in control of his own court. Hua Siqian, as the leader of the Grand Secretariat, had the final say over what Shui Shoujuo could accomplish in that position. It's during this period that we begin to see a change in Shui Shoujuo's approach. He stepped back from his radical rhetoric and kept a low profile, thus becoming the person we're all familiar with now. The longer Yu Shaozai listened, the more alarmed he became. But if he shares the same goals as the scholar officials, why didn't he reach out to us? Then, was Han Cheng? He put everything into toppling Hua Siqian and Pan Rugui in the incident leading up to Li Jianheng's ascension, Shen Zichuan explained. But he very quickly realized that Li Jianheng was not bold, decisive, or visionary enough for him. Li Jianheng was constantly caught in the tug-of-war between various interests, and the scholar officials of common origins, even under Secretariat Elder Hai's leadership, failed to remove the influence of the Empress Dowager. Shen Zichuan turned his head aside. The little jade bead on his right ear was eclipsed by shadow. A great part of the Imperial College students' dissatisfaction with the scholar officials was their weakness in standing up to the noble clans. This is likely also the reason Xue Xiuzhuo no longer trusts these officials of common origins. Secretariat Elder Hai's conservative approach kept Great Zhou from falling apart at the seams, yet it also gave the noble clans a chance to catch their breath. Yeah, the light and shadow theme again. I don't know if I like this particular image of the shadow on the earring. Don't know what that means. The noble clans feed on one another. You saw how Wei Huaigu's fall made way for Han Cheng's rise. This was not the result Xue Xiuzhuo wished for. Shen Zichuan stopped and narrowed his eyes. No wonder he wanted Xiansheng so badly. Qi Huilian had long been a guiding light for the radicals, those in favor of complete political turnover. He had achieved great things in the Eastern Palace. In the short time before the Crown Prince's untimely demise, Qi Huilian accomplished such feats as establishing the Yellow Register, a victory he likely owed in part to the diligence of the Eastern Palace's subordinates in discharging their duties, and their tenacity in forging ahead regardless of public opinion. If Xue Xiuzhuo wanted to break away from the conciliatory approach that characterized Hai Liangyi's era, then he would seek Qi Huilian's help. That he would seek Qi Huilian's help seemed of a piece. Yet Qi Huilian had refused, and Xue Xiuzhuo had handed him over to Han Cheng. Shen Zichuan pressed his lips into a thin line. In the candlelight, his profile was cold and detached. He'll stop at nothing to achieve his goals. This man puts faith in no one but himself. He is counting on the new emperor to prop up the Zhou Empire. For this, he doesn't hesitate to offend the conservative noble clans. He wishes to bring new blood into Chudu and overhaul the system. We helped take down Wei Huaigu and others in Chudu, yet their fall has merely opened vacancies into which he can install his own people. Lord Yu, you were wrong. His memorial moved the hearts of the Empire's students, not because the Emperor's daughter sounded wonderful, but because his last sentence did. There is no law in the world that decreed priority should be accorded to those of direct descent, nor those of noble blood in the selection of court officials. See, that makes sense. What are we adding to the drinking game? Anything about light and shadow? But I was gonna say it makes sense. It sounds like Xue Xiuzhuo. I kind of don't know what his ultimate goal is. Like, he wants power, but I don't know what he wants power for. But it feels like he's using the idea of the common people, over the noble clans, and ousting the inherent power that the noble clans have. He's like, people want that, and he's using that to gain his power. But I'm not sure if he really cares about it. But yeah, the question is what does he want power to do ultimately? The noble clans dominated the upper echelons of government and kept a stranglehold on the imperial court of Great Zhou. The reigning emperor's assertiveness, or the lack thereof, dictated whether those from common backgrounds were able to break through the blockade of those 8 family names. The common officials had been at a nadir since the latter years of the Yongyi era. It had been too long since they'd tasted any true victories. What they desperately needed was a sovereign well disposed towards scholars of common backgrounds. Male or female, it mattered not. as long as this candidate was able to rouse the hearts of the humble scholars, inspire their confidence, and shoulder the weight of their expectations after the successive passing of Qi Huilian and Hai Liangyi, they would be embraced by the students of the Imperial College. The Empress Dowager's long reign had not only intensified the ostracism they faced, it had amplified the weakness and incompetence of the Li clan's emperors, an impression that had taken firm root in the minds of the masses. The students had been so harsh on Kong Qiu and Sen Yu because they could no longer endure the repeated compromises these officials made in the current imperial court. Hai Liangyi, who had conceded his entire career, had given his life in one final remonstration. Why must Kong Qiu go on conceding? The chance to reform the world was within their grasp. Failing to act now was tantamount to a dereliction of duty. But was this really the moment? Shen Zichuan thought otherwise. Why had Hai Liangyi chosen to make concession after concession to the noble clans? Because these clans had long become a chronic disease infecting Great Zhou. They ought to have scraped the bones and cauterized the wounds as early as during the Yongyi years, yet they dragged their feet, and Zhongbo fell before Hai Liangyi could make his move. The empire had resembled a feeble man in his twilight years, set upon and kicked by thieves until he choked on blood. It was hard for cuts and bruises to heal, even harder for internal injuries to mend themselves. In the moments before his death, Hai Liangyi had questioned the imperial court. He had asked if this was everyone's fault for allowing this degeneracy. Had he included himself, too? If he hadn't pushed Hua Siqian so hard back then, if he had been more diplomatic in his handling of things, would Zhang Bo have avoided the tragedy of the Biansha massacre? Hai Liangyi would never know, but this incident directly affected the way he led the administration in the later years of the Xiande Emperor's reign. He adopted an attitude of appeasement, attempting a softer influence. He never dared act so rashly again. He moved with a constant awareness of the risks of the political situation he was mired in. But these were considerations the fledgling students could not understand. Perhaps Xue Xiuzhuo did not have the power to dictate the direction in which the Empire's students would move. He was a fisherman balancing amid the stormy waves, trying to discern the optimal moment to cast his net. This man hadn't crawled through the mud of the imperial court for so many years just to return empty-handed. He understood the resentment between the common scholars and the court officials better than Shen Zichuan. The flames of war had been ignited by others this time. The flames of war had been ignited by others before his time, and the sparks now flying had kindled the same fire in those who followed in their steps. Xue Xiuzhuo had repeatedly beseeched Hai Liangyi to formally accept him as his student, to no avail. He later took desperate measures to force Qi Huilian to help him, yet still he failed. He was a stubborn rock amid a battle between two parties, destined to cut his own bloody path out. He was a merciless character who would not spare even himself. A fierce light gleamed in Shen Zichuan's eyes. He felt that he had been thwarted. He had been driven out of Chudu like a dog with its tail between its legs, defenseless and beaten half to death. Xue Xiuzhuo had tossed Shi Hongxuan aside at exactly the right time, then emptied the Shi clan's silver vaults before Shen Zichuan could make his move. He had long been preparing for this day. And what had Shen Zichuan been doing at that time? He had still been naively thinking he could rely on his silver tongue to drive a wedge between the noble clans. On reflection, Xue Xiuzhuo had revealed his might as early as the scandal regarding the imperial army's misrecorded silk. Shen Zichuan had been defeated in this battle. but since he was still alive, he would fight this war to the end. As the one who had inherited Shi Huilian's life's work, he couldn't accept being defeated again and again. They had already fled from the sheltered walls of Chudu to the crumbling frontier torn by war. He had to find his footing fast, or there would be no place left for him in these turbulent times. There were no weaklings among the up-and-coming talents of the land. All watched the developing situation ravenously, like a tiger eyeing its prey. If he wished to sit down and calmly debate ideals, he first had to win the right to a seat at the table. Xiao Qie looked at Chen Zichuan's silent profile and asked Yu Xiaozai, "Have you seen the girl emperor?" Yu Xiaozai was in the middle of fishing the letter Chen Yu had written out of his robes. His hand stilled. "Not yet. When I left Chudu, the Ministry of Rites was starting their preparations for the coronation. The Empress Dowager wanted to summon the Emperor's daughter for a meeting, but Xue Xiuzhuo declined." Xiao Qie tapped the armrest gently. Sounds like he isn't completely confident of success either. We'll have to wait and see. It may be that this girl emperor he raised in 4 short years is no more than a paper tiger that will topple at the first touch. I'd like to see how long he thinks she can bluff Chudu. Chen Zichuan shook off his abstraction and composed himself. Let's just hope she isn't another Li Jianheng. Restless, Xiao Qie straightened and asked Yu Xiaozai, "We still don't know what her official name will be. If they're going to write her into the imperial family tree, will she go down as Li Jianting?" A strange expression came over Yu Xiaozai's face. That's the name, all right. He wrote on the mat with his finger, one stroke at a time. But the Jian character is not the same generational character shared with the late emperor, nor the Ting of her commoner name. It's written like this. Stroke by stroke, 2 characters emerged. Sword and thunder. Shocked, Chen Zichuan exchanged glances with Xiao Qie. That's the end of the chapter. Well, that's the last one that I'm reading today. I feel like I'm gonna like this emperor, even though politically she's being used by Xue Xiuzhuo. Also, if anyone remembers who Yanqing is, I'm gonna look up. Like, I forget if... Oh no, did you miss the end of the chapter, Henry? Is anyone else having lag? It's, yeah, they said the new emperor's name is Li Jianting, and the characters are the characters for Sword and Thunder. And it's and Shen Zichuan and Xiao Qie were like, we're concerned. We got Avalanche and Storm and Thunder. That sounds cool AF. I agree. I need to see who Yanqing is. Is Yanqing the, like, courtesy name or other official name of Xue Xiuzhuo? Because that would make sense. I've just completely forgotten. It's probably something that I should know, but I just don't. At the moment. Where? Yes, okay, Xue Xiuzhuo, courtesy name Yanqing. That's what I was thinking, but I could not remember. So, that makes sense. When we come back on Wednesday, we'll be on chapter 124, which is called The Die is Cast. Great. I've been saying it, but the chapter titles in this book are great. They're very simple. Like, a lot of times it is just like somebody's name, but they just always have an impact. Oh, you're welcome, Henry. And yeah, you said, I mean, it doesn't sound good for the kingdom. I don't think they need a storm right now. Like, the new emperor, I'm kind of in my head, I'm like, well, I'm rooting for her as a person because everyone's like, oh my god, a girl can't be an emperor. But I know that the situation in which she is becoming emperor is like not good. So I'm conflicted. Um yes, the chapter titles are not as clearly telling as Meat Buns, and I appreciate the subtlety for this novel. Right, like Meat Bun titles are like sometimes it'll kind of tell you like a big thing that'll happen in the chapter, or it's just like a really long title. And I like them for like entirely different reasons than I like these chapter titles. These are just like they are usually pretty subtle. And if they're not subtle, they're just like snappy. Like, here's the thing, that's it, that's all. It definitely it works for this type of book. Um so I am gonna go. I will see y'all again on Wednesday. I mean, also see y'all in the chat tomorrow for Brittany's stream, probably. But, yeah, have a good one. Thank you for joining me today. Bye.